All right, guys, we officially have the release of the AP poll here. It was just released a few minutes ago. For week number 4, I'm going to take everyone through it and do another full breakdown like I always do around this time. Let's talk about the top 3 teams. Georgia firmly maintains the number 1 overall spot. Guys, the major issue with getting Georgia out of that number 1 spot, we're gonna need Oregon to start losing games, and it was looking so great. You know, Washington State up by 2 scores late in the 4th quarter. I don't know what happened. I look at my phone, they're down by 10. So the thing with Georgia, you know, they were 45-point favorites over Kent State. It was a noon game. Maybe they were looking ahead. Maybe they weren't taking it seriously. It wasn't a very good performance by them, but they're going to stay number 1 as long as Oregon keeps winning, because you've got the weight of that one win over Oregon, 49-3. If Oregon keeps winning, what Oregon is doing is helping Georgia more than Georgia is helping themselves by beating Kent State and Samford and all these bad teams. So we need Oregon to lose if Georgia's going to move down, or obviously Georgia to somehow lose, but they're in the, SEC East. They've got, a few easier games coming up. They're number 1. Bama is number 2. Very interesting here. Alabama number 2, Ohio State number 3. Very close in terms of points. Ohio State really closed the gap. Alabama just 4 votes in front. And, that's due to Ohio State crushing Wisconsin. It was an absolute joke of an ABC 7:30 game. You've got Herbstreit and Fowler breaking down, talking about nothing at the end of the first quarter because it was already over by the end of the first quarter. Of course, Wisconsin is not an amazing team, but they're certainly better than Vanderbilt. That is who Alabama beat, and Alabama still has major questions when it comes to that wide receiver core. Right now, Ohio State and Alabama, 2A and 2B, with Georgia, the clear number 1. They received 55 first-place votes compared to Bama and Ohio State, each getting 4. Let's take a look at 4 through 10. We've got Michigan coming in at number 4, holding strong there. They beat Maryland. They didn't cover the spread. I think people are finally starting to come to their senses with Michigan. And I think the major thing that casual fans didn't realize, and I've said this multiple times before, Michigan's non-conference schedule wasn't bad. It was so historically disgusting that people kind of thought, oh yeah, Ohio State's playing Arkansas State, Toledo. Arkansas State would beat Colorado State by 50 points. Like, people don't understand. They see Michigan dominate these 3 teams. They're like, Alabama struggles with Texas. Ohio State struggles with Notre Dame. If Notre Dame faced UConn, it would be a 60-point game, folks. That's how bad UConn is. Michigan's non-conference schedule was so bad, they get spotted a free 7 points against Maryland, and they get the ball to start the second half because Maryland muffs a punt on the opening kickoff, or muffs the opening kickoff, and Maryland hangs in. Tagovailoa gets injured. I'm not impressed with Michigan's defense personally. Should they be ranked 4th? I mean, I would put them a little bit lower. They haven't beaten anyone. They just haven't beaten anyone. But I understand keeping them in the top 6 or 7. They had a great year last year. They did lose a lot of talent, but I do think their offense, a little bit higher of a ceiling with J.J. McCarthy. Personally, you've got Clemson at number 5. So disappointing with Clemson and their defense. You do have to give DJ Uiagalelei credit for hanging in there, and that's a major win for Clemson. If they would have lost that game, they've got NC State this week. Wow, that is a big win on the road. Against a Wake Forest team I really don't think is very good. But still, give Clemson credit, the offense credit. I think Clemson's new defensive coordinator is a total joke. I mean, how can you not generate pressure against Wake Forest? They're completely one-dimensional. There's no adjustments that were made in that game by the Clemson defense. USC moves up a spot. They played the game that nobody watched on the Pac-12 network. They won 17-14. Caleb Williams was bad. But I guess they just moved up. Oregon State is a decent team. They were unbeaten, but they're probably going to end up being a 4 or 5 loss team this year. Kentucky at number 7. No clue. I have zero clue how Kentucky is inside the top 10. They've faced a bunch of MAC teams and Florida, and congratulations, they beat Florida. I get it. They look bad. They also faced an FCS team, Youngstown State, and didn't look very good. So I don't know how Tennessee is below Kentucky. Oklahoma State was on a bye. They kind of had a weird early season bye. They're at number 9. I think they're going to lose this week. I think they face Baylor. Oklahoma State will lose. And then NC State is at number 10. I believe NC State, they face Clemson this week. So that's great news for ESPN. That's the 7:30 game on ESPN. And that will be a top 10 matchup. I mean, we'll see. NC State really hasn't impressed me. They didn't cover against UConn, but it was kind of a situation. They were playing their backups, whatever. Number 11 is Penn State. They move up via, teams losing. They're number 11 now. I would say I'm a little timid on Penn State. I don't love Sean Clifford. We will see with them. They did beat Central Michigan. It was kind of a closer game in the first half, but they pulled away. They end up winning by 19. Utah at number 12. Utah is a top 10 team. Utah is better than Kentucky. And then people say, oh, but Kentucky beat Florida and Utah lost to Florida. I don't care. The transitive property like that doesn't work. Utah, I have full faith. They're going to beat USC this year. At home, I think Utah's a top 10 team. There's Oregon at number 13. That's the major issue. So Georgia, they beat the number 13 team in the nation 49-3. They're not going to fall from number 1. If you want Georgia to fall from number 1, we need Oregon to lose. Guys, that's what we need. Ole Miss at number 14, who knows? I mean, they barely beat Tulsa. They've not proven anything. Jackson Dart's been inconsistent. They're at 14. Washington at 15. I understand. They beat Stanford. It's impressive. They beat Michigan. Is that Michigan State win really that good, though? You have to factor all these things in. Michigan State looked horrible against Minnesota. You've got Baylor at number 16 getting a very solid win, controlling the game on the road at Iowa State. A&M at number 17 after their close win over a ranked team in Arkansas. Oklahoma falling all the way down to number 18. Wow. For Oklahoma, very shocking. Brett Venables comes in. You think they're going to switch. They're going to be a defensive-minded team. Last night, Dillon Gabriel, crazy stats, 4 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. And Adrian frickin' Martinez has 4 rushing touchdowns for Kansas State. This coming after Kansas State lost to Tulane. If Kansas State would have won last week, they'd be inside the top 10 right now. But they did lose. BYU at number 19. They beat Wyoming. They were kind of a close game there for a little bit against Wyoming late night. Arkansas is down 10 spots. I would probably move them outside of the top 20. But I understand it. They do have KJ Jefferson. He's a beast. I understand it. Minnesota, See, I would have Minnesota over Arkansas. The one knock on Minnesota, they had a horrible non-conference schedule. Horrible non-conference schedule. They did crush Michigan State. And I mean crush. It was an annihilation. So Minnesota, the Big Ten needs Minnesota to keep winning. Good news for the Big Ten. Minnesota is the Big Ten's only hope to make the conference championship game ranked inside the top 15. Wisconsin is a mess. They already have 2 losses, including that horrible non-conference loss to Washington State. Iowa can't score a point. So they need the Big Ten West. They need Minnesota to at least go into the conference championship game with 1 loss, and you would have Minnesota beating Wisconsin, beating Iowa, possibly losing to Penn State in their whiteout game, and you go into the Big Ten championship game with 1 loss, possibly ranked inside the top 15, possibly facing Ohio State. That's what the Big Ten wants. You've got Wake Forest at 22. If they did lose at home, but it's a game where they were throwing all over the place. The offense looks great. I'm still concerned about Wake Forest a little bit because they're just so one-dimensional. They really can't run the ball. I guess they were running it well towards the end of that Clemson game. I just think that has to do with Clemson having a horrible defensive coordinator, personally. Either way, Wake Forest, I understand why they're still in the top 25 after the loss. Florida State gets a shout-out. They're inside the top 25 at number 23. They're 4-0. after beating Boston College. Boston College is horrible, although they did, FSU did beat Louisville, kind of came back in that game. Personally, I don't love FSU. It's just, we'll see. I don't mind them being ranked. And Pittsburgh coming in at 24. They beat Rhode Island. It is what it is. And then Kansas State coming in at 25. So people are obviously going to have a big issue with Kansas State being ranked, 7 spots below Oklahoma after Kansas State completely controlled the game in Oklahoma, won on the road, by basically up the entire second half by double digits. People are going to have problems with that. The only thing I'll say, we have to remember Kansas State just lost to Tulane. But again, this is one of the issues with the rankings and things like that. It's human error. They're not going to all react so drastically. I'm sure some people moved Kansas State in front of Oklahoma because of the head-to-head on the road, but they are behind them there. And then the teams receiving votes, Kansas, I don't know who Kansas has beaten. Who has Kansas beaten? I know you could say the same thing about Minnesota, but it's like people have such low expectations for Kansas. When you actually compare their schedule and who they've beaten, it's very weak. And you're beating Duke by 8 points, man. That is, at home, that's not impressive at all. It's just not. Cincinnati, I love Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati should be ranked. I believe in Luke Fickell. He's a good coach. And Ben Bryant, wow. I think he had 300 passing yards in the first half against Indiana. You've got Florida. Certainly Florida, tough loss to Tennessee. They are a team that has the talent to be a top 25 team. They've had some tough luck with the schedule right now, but I think that loss to Kentucky is really going to hurt Florida. You beat Utah week 1, but then you lose all your momentum by losing to Kentucky that second week. So that's really what's going to hurt them. Washington State receiving votes, certainly. Tragic what happened to Washington State. You're up by 2 scores. You're undefeated. If you beat Oregon at home, not only are you going to get ranked, you're going to get so much hype off of that game. It's just a game you got to win. You got to hang on and win that game. Syracuse is undefeated. They beat Virginia on Friday night. They're receiving some votes. Oregon State, very similar situation to Washington State. Close game against USC. They end up losing it. Texas Tech beats Texas. They get a few votes. North Carolina, I don't know if they forgot. North Carolina lost to Notre Dame. North Carolina might have the worst defense in FBS. No, I don't think that's possible. Florida International, I think, has that. Or there's some other teams that, like Hawaii is also horrible. But North Carolina, in terms of Power 5 defenses, oh my God. You've got LSU receiving some votes, I guess. I don't know. UCLA, because they're 4-0. UCLA has faced no one. Tulane gets 3 votes. Shout out to them. And then TCU gets a vote. I think TCU is going to start appearing on a lot more ballots. They are an impressive team. Well, I don't know who they face next. If they get one more big win, TCU will be ranked, in my opinion. But guys, that's going to do it for the top 25 updated rankings here after week number 4 from the AP poll. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description.